I befriend a group of youngsters. They are a compilation of the first three houses in my rotation for meals, and their ages all around 10. Miguel is the runt of the group, so it follows that he has a bit of a complex, willing to kick any loudmouth in the shin. He is hands down the best youth soccer player in Arimae, an accomplishment that unfortunately doesn't mean much in the greater scheme of things. What scouts there are in Panama aren't making it to the Darien. Maxi is tall and lengthy, Miguel's antithesis, and is always wearing his blue and orange shorts, faux Crocs, and a baggy t-shirt. Easily the dirtiest player of the group, most games end due to a petty fight instigated by Maxi. When walking about town, Maxi is always the guy leading the group. Juan, or Babasan, is the quirky youngster, often adjusting his voice to an odd octave that resembles Skeeter from the cartoon series Doug. He is the eldest of two brothers who live with only their mother, a situation that the community balances with more inclusion. Babasan is the most patient with me in my lack of language, always repeating phrases and words until semi-understanding, adding a frustrated spin between each of my failures. Miguel, on the other hand, will just leave me in disgust. To not confuse Babasan more with American denseness, I refrain from calling him Skeeter, a dead-on nickname that has no significance for him whatsoever. This is difficult for me. Finally, there's Andreas, the shyest who always wears a smile. Left-footed and of average height, he's a good player on the field, but the most reserved of the group off the pitch. Details of our first main field game are sketchy, but I do recall the smallest game we ever played between an Arimae cul-de-sac of stilted huts. Like most pickup soccer games, we scrounged for goalposts and settled on two sticks jammed into the ground at either end of our impromptu field. Miguel's house backed one goal, while the fence that separates my living quarters from this section of town was behind the other, slightly guarded by a tree. We all played barefoot, doing our best to kick the ball and not the dried horse poop speckled about the improvised pitch. Afterwards, the children were called home for dinner, including me. The boys came to learn my lazy schedule, understanding that I either studied or ran errands during the morning, and wasn't available for adventure until late in the afternoon. One or all would then pop their head through the laddered entrance to my living quarters, needing only one word to get me out of my hammock. Soccer? The answer was always the same. 5 minutes, I'd say. I have to change. When I say change, that really just means putting on shoes. It wasn't exactly pulling teeth to get me away from whatever I was doing, being that it was usually studying. The Chicos' heads would then disappear and disperse, rounding up all the youth who usually participated in soccer with the Gringo. The toughest decision always dealt with whether I should change underwear, knowing I was about to sweat out whichever pair I was wearing. My general rule became any underwear that had been worn less than 2 days got taken off and replaced by an already deemed dirty pair. A similar rule existed for socks, as those had been worn in only one previous game were still eligible. The outfit would be completed by a t-shirt, serving its purpose of a respectful gesture while walking about town, only to be taken off once the game started. So, descending from the second level, I duck my head as to not crack it on the wood while stepping down the ladder. I take a left around the fence and head towards Miguel's house where most of the kids have gathered, and from there we continue to the field. Here's the scene that I want you to envision, one that happens in every sporting Disney movie. I'm in the middle, towering over the youngsters, and we're all walking in slow motion towards the camera with dried horse poop at our feet and huts out of focus in the background. Miguel is on the furthest left, looking tough with eyes straight ahead. Maxi, who is responsible for bringing the ball, hops into the scene from the left with the pelota under his right arm, and jams an elbow into Miguel's shoulder, instigating a punch from Miguel. Babasan is to my right and we are conversing. My shoulders are raised and arms extended away from my body in my general questioning pose. Babasan then shakes his head and covers his face with his hands, trying to reconcile within himself how this Gringo could be so awful in his language. Andreas anchors the far right, just smiling, and then greets one of the many sets of brothers that hop into frame. By the time we reach the field, the line includes 8 kids and 1 adult child, a motley crew of characters about to play a little pickup soccer. As usual, they want to play the full field. The advantage of this is getting to shoot at regulation-sized goals, but the greater downside is that of conditioning and focus, something the majority of the match's participants can't help but struggle in. To play a 4-on-4 full-field game of soccer with that of youngsters is trying. Not once do they adhere to my suggestion of playing a shorter field. Most likely this is because they have no idea what I'm talking about. Hell, I don't even know what I'm talking about. Team distribution then falls to me. Selfishly, but still fairly, I usually take Miguel on my team, but then surround us with some of the less skilled kids. The rest of the niños are divided by my hand on their head, guiding them to one side or the other. Objections are muttered, but never acted out. Brothers are usually split for rivalry purposes in an attempt to try to make the game mean as much as possible to the kids, delaying further the eventual breakdown of the childhood boredom. Amongst the consternation, play always starts off with me looking around, telling the kids we're starting, and then passing to Miguel, in turn ending any verbal squabble that had arisen. My role then turns to that of distributor. To dominate a soccer match of 10-year-olds would be some kind of sick ego boost that unfortunately I don't believe I need. So I get my ego boost anyways through this realization. With such a big field and lack of players to fill it, positioning is broken up into halves. The kids hovering around the goal, or in most cases the jungle gym, represent the defensive half of the field, and those who attack with no regard for defense are considered strikers. During a match, there is always an instance of me yelling at these kids to get back and help on defense while I run in a dead sprint, lapping the youngsters in their short legs. Once finished delivering my impassioned instructions to my strikers, attention then goes to the defensive players, who more times than not have to be told to stop climbing on or around the goal and look like respectable defenders. These acts of entertainment on the slower end of the field I cannot completely condemn, however, as in my younger soccer years I was known to produce handstands and other risky tumbling moves during lulls in the action. The afternoon game I'll never forget was played in an absolute downpour after the 5 of us had explored Arimae's yucca fields. We had just turned around to return to the town when the rain started, and by the time we reached Arimae we were soaked to the bone. Already wet and looking to spend the rest of the day under a roof, drying what clothes I could, Miguel asked the only question that could have got me back outside. Want to play some soccer? Yes, Miguel. Yes, I do. There are few things I love more than soccer in the rain, and most aren't even that pornographic. Hardwood floors for one, corn dogs. Just throw in all the other stuff that sensitive guys should like, and you got it. Miguel must have seen my eyes light up, because he instantly took off on a run to spread the news of a mud game. 10 minutes later, everybody barefoot, we were running and diving about the field. The ball as hard to obtain as a mistress's wanted wedding proposal. Our never-ending smiles shined white while every part of our body and clothes were the color of wet. At some point during every game, Maxie would frustrate both Miguel and Babasan, producing a brief scuffle that would include flying shoes or sandals and threats of departure. Being the mature one, I would break it up physically and facilitate apologies through my inferior language. The good days were ones where we actually played the full allotted time, ending at 5 so I could shower before dinner. The bad days ended in never-ending scuffles, or my unhappiness with the level of effort being given, like when the boys would group up and sit in various spots around the field, picking grass or wrestling. I would call the game when more than half of the boys got into the state of disinterest, at one point throwing a pathetic tantrum myself and walking off in a huff of emotion. What I really needed was that kid's whistle. I believe everyone would like to think that they could coach a junior sporting team of some sort, but if I'm completely honest with myself, other than baseball, I don't believe I could do it because of my ridiculous expectations of effort. The games were always a welcome distraction, though, giving me some type of exercise and language practice with a less advanced clientele. The soccer pitch was not the only place this happened, as I started making myself a constant at Arimae's Riverside all-purpose area. For the ladies of Arimae, the river is a place to wash clothes and dishes. For kids, it's a place for entertainment. For the men, only on the hottest days would they soak after work. For me, it was an all-natural tanning salon, country club pool, and language school. The main area of occupation is at the end of the only road in Arimae and lies at the bottom of a slippery slope of dirt and gravel that takes some care when traversing. Once safely on the banks, slick rock gradually descends into the river, except for one spot where a ledge breaks straight down into a 5-foot pool. I don't know anyone my age who is opposed to a tan, especially one naturally produced. So I adhered to my vain side, trying each day to obtain 20 minutes of PTRs, primetime rays. Sprawled about the slick rock, with my feet and ankles resting in the water, I absorbed all the sun could give me. Remember, I'm a Seattle native getting to see the sun in January. Can you really blame me? Always in my presence were children playing and women washing, all of whom showed some questioning interest of, why is he just laying there? I would answer vocally, trying to explain that I want to be more brown, to be like you. Eventually, one of the kids would inquisitively make their way to my area of leisure, their curiosity getting the best of them. Like the patient, predatory alligators always featured on nature programs, I would wait, and wait, and wait for my gazelle to find themselves in a false sense of security, and then pounce at the perfect moment, slaughtering them with raw power. Really, I would just pick them up, carry them around over my head for a while, and then throw them in the deepest part of the river. Naturally, when playing in a watery atmosphere where footing can be established, the afternoon would lead to the most dangerous game of all, chicken fighting. Oddly, out of the abundance of youngsters that enjoyed being lifted or thrown, only a few had the confidence to get on my shoulders. I'm not sure if they were nervous due to my obsession with winning, or scared of our opponents who were almost always a pair of brothers that carried true indigenous blood in them. In an odd strategy, the more obese of the two brothers would take the top scrapper position. Only one notable youngster took pride in being on my shoulders, the one that would come to be known as the Great Matir. He was my first scrapper and took his fighting seriously. We went 6-0 the first day in the lagoon. What advantage we had due to my height and strength was neutralized by an inconsistent river bottom that's topography was foreign to my grasping feet. The brothers would attack, I would stumble for footing, and Matir would shriek in some awkward noise that could either have been extreme fear or enjoyment. Matir would then meet his adversary in a deathlock of hands, leaving my torso and feet to provide strenuous balance while contorting my body with every false-footed step. The gallery of kids squatting on the slick rock gasped and swung with every dramatic position change. With how tightly I gripped Matir's ankles with my hands, I'm surprised he never suffered a broken bone. We were the classic clown punching bag, often going completely underwater only to resurface like a sunken ship being torn from the water, a tidal wave left in the wake of our resurgence. Immediately, the brothers' faces would fill with shock, and Matir would take advantage, practically jumping off my shoulders in a violent offensive. Mentally destroyed by our never-ending comebacks from submerged death in the river, the brothers had nothing else to do except lose, the scrapper tiredly flipping his feet off of his brother's shoulders. Matches concluded. Matir and I exited the river to cheers from the children, and the brothers still smiling in defeat. I mean, did they really think they were going to beat us? Immediately, I would be bombarded with requests to be thrown in the river. Needing rest, I would simply sit down on the rocks and watch the never-ending spectacle of them running down the slick rock and throwing themselves into the deepest part of the river in some random flipping motion like suicidal lemmings. Aggressively simple, this activity seemed to never bore the youth of Arimae. Attention is only diverted when one of the kids presses his hand on my bare back, receding quickly and yelling at the others to come see his discovery. At first my thought was, yeah, I know I'm not that tan. But it became obvious quickly that they were mesmerized by something much more odd, something as foreign as myself, my skin color. The first boy to press on my back saw a spectacle that he had never seen before. Pressed skin turning from one color to another. For us white folk, the pressing of one's skin to check if we're burned or have frostbite is a common practice, and we hopefully expect to see our skin return to the proper shade once pressed. But for these kids, with their double-shot mocha complexions who have never had to check for a sunburn in their lives, my chameleon back and its morphine tendencies was too much to grasp. Within seconds, 10 kids were pressing their hands on various parts of my back, awing as my skin went from lightly tan to white and back again. Although amusing, the constant pressing of hands on my back did not have a massaging effect, and I had to call the spectacle after a couple of minutes before the whole town found its way to the river. As I've noted before, Arimae has had Peace Corps volunteers in the past, allowing for odd discoveries like the skin exposition to take place before my arrival. But for whatever reason, my presence in town continued to provide what seemed to be original discoveries of the immigrated white man. Unfortunately, not all were as amusing as the first one. Brothers are usually split for rivalry purposes. Oh man.